I work part-time at a small bakery that makes wedding cakes. My job is to help customers choose their cake flavors and designs. One morning, a couple had an appointment at 8:30 a.m., but they arrived early, at 7:45 a.m. They brought an older woman with them, who seemed unhappy from the start. We were already busy with the morning rush, but my boss told me to help them. The bride was kind and excited about picking a cake. The older woman, her future mother-in-law, sighed loudly and walked outside for a smoke. That's when I knew this wouldn't be easy. The couple quickly picked 5 cake designs they liked, but the mother-in-law didn't approve of any. This one is too fancy. This one is too simple. This one is too big. That one is too small, she complained. She rejected every choice. It felt like a fairy tale where nothing was good enough. I asked how many guests they were expecting. The bride said a small number, but the mother-in-law doubled it. I already invited extra guests, she insisted. The bride looked frustrated. She repeated that it was a small wedding, but her future mother-in-law wouldn't listen. The mother-in-law kept arguing. I politely reminded her that the bride had the final say. She scoffed. Then why did I even come? She snapped. The bride didn't back down. I don't know why you insisted on coming, she replied. The mother-in-law glared. My son is getting married. I have a right to be here. The bride stayed calm. He's marrying me, she said. I don't need your opinion unless I ask for it. The mother-in-law sighed angrily, muttered something under her breath, and stormed outside again for another cigarette. The tension in the room was heavy. The groom had been silent, looking at the floor. The bride turned to him, her patience wearing thin. I told you this would happen, she said firmly. He sighed. What do you want me to do? She didn't hesitate. Control your mother, or I will. He sighed again and slowly followed his mother outside, like a soldier heading to battle. The bride turned back to me, apologized for the scene, and asked about scheduling a cake tasting. I mentioned we could set a password so no one else could change the order. She loved the idea and had one request. She asked me not to share the password with her fiancé. I wrote it down and scheduled her tasting. Later that night, while cleaning up, the phone rang. My coworker answered, then waved me over. It was about a wedding cake. I was exhausted, but I took the call. Hi, this is the bride-to-be. I need to change my cake order, the caller said. My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. It was the mother-in-law. I stayed calm and asked for her passcode. Oh, I forgot it, she said casually. I wasn't surprised. Sorry, ma'am. I can't make changes without it. She grew annoyed. Just tell me the appointment time then. I refused. We take privacy seriously. You'll have to visit with ID. She scoffed and hung up. The next day, I followed bakery rules and called the bride to confirm. Wait, what? She asked. I never called you. I reassured her that no changes had been made. She was furious. I knew she'd try this, she fumed. She asked me to note in her file that she wouldn't approve any changes over the phone. We both knew her mother-in-law wasn't giving up. This was just the beginning. A few days later, while I was helping customers, I heard a familiar voice yelling. I turned and saw the mother-in-law arguing with my young coworker, who looked close to tears. The mother-in-law demanded changes to the cake order. I don't have my ID, just do it, she snapped. My coworker nervously explained she couldn't. The mother-in-law rolled her eyes. Ugh, you people are so useless. She turned to the other customers. Can you believe this service? I stepped in. Ma'am, without an ID or passcode, we cannot change the order. She huffed and stomped out of the bakery. That night, I flagged the bride's account and informed my manager. But the mother-in-law wasn't done. She kept calling, hoping to trick different employees. One night, I was working alone at 3 a.m. The bakery was dark except for the kitchen light. Suddenly, the phone rang. I ignored it. It rang again and again. Then I saw movement outside. My heart pounded. Someone was standing right outside the front window. The phone rang once more. I answered, and my blood turned cold. "I can see you," the mother-in-law whispered. I hung up, locked the doors, and called my manager. By the time my manager arrived, she was gone. But cigarette butts outside showed she had been waiting there for hours. The bride was horrified when I told her. My manager tightened security, and the owner warned that if the mother-in-law returned, we'd call the police. The bride and groom had a serious talk. The fiancé finally agreed to cut his mother out of the planning. But just when we thought it was over, the mother-in-law's calls doubled. She even had someone else try to place an order under the bride's name. She refused to give up. At the cake tasting, the bride looked exhausted. "She won't stop," she sighed. The groom was struggling too. He loved his mother, but he finally saw how controlling she was. The bride, sick of everything, made a decision. "If she comes, I won't be there." The groom hesitated, but he agreed. His mother was uninvited. The mother-in-law was furious. She called non-stop, even hired someone to pretend to be the bride. But we weren't fooled. This wedding was happening, and the cake was safe. Or so we thought. A few days before the wedding, the mother-in-law made one last attempt. She called, demanding changes. I answered. "You again?" She scoffed. "You people are awful." I had enough. "Ma'am, we don't want your business." Silence. Then a furious shriek. "What did you just say?" I stood firm. "You harassed my staff and tried to steal this wedding. You are banned from this bakery." She hung up. My manager laughed. "Finally," she said. But the damage was done. The bride, emotionally exhausted, made a shocking decision. She called off the wedding. The next morning, she walked into the bakery with new plans. "We're changing the cake," she said with a grin. Bigger, bolder, more guests, no compromises. She was throwing a freedom party. "What's the theme?" I asked. She smirked. "Alice in Wonderland, but this time, no rules." I smiled. This was her moment. No stress, no drama, just a celebration she controlled. She even joked about sending her ex a slice that said, "Good riddance in frosting." This wasn't just about cake. This was about taking her life back. The night of the party, we delivered the cake. It was colorful, fun, and completely her. Her real friends and family arrived. The people she actually wanted at her wedding. And best of all, security at the door. The mother-in-law, of course, tried to crash the party. She argued, begged, even called her son. But it didn't work. He wasn't invited either. This wasn't their day. It was hers. As the party ended, the bride stood up, holding her drink high. "To bad decisions," she said, grinning, "and to the freedom of making better ones." The crowd cheered. She was free. The bakery returned to normal, but we never forgot the story of the wedding cake disaster. The mother-in-law never called again. The bride moved on, stronger than ever. The fiancé back home with mommy. And the cake? It was the sweetest victory of all.